Mason Hayes stood at the viewport of his stealth ship, watching the supposedly abandoned research facility on Europa's icy surface. 3 months of tracking suspicious cargo shipments had led him here, to this remote outpost of Jupiter's moon. The former military pilot's instincts told him something was very wrong about this place, beyond its official designation as a decommissioned xenobiology research center. The facility's power consumption didn't match its abandoned status. Neither did the weekly supply drops or the heavily armed security personnel he'd observed through his ship's thermal imaging. But what truly caught his attention were the energy signatures, patterns unlike anything he'd seen in his 15 years of space exploration. Running final scan, his ship's AI announced, detecting 23 non-human life forms within the facility's lower levels. Biometric patterns suggest severe distress. Mason's jaw tightened. He'd seen enough during the Proxima War to recognize the signs of illegal experimentation. The Galactic Concordat had strict laws about the treatment of sentient species, but there were always those who thought themselves above such restrictions. He began his pre-mission checklist, checking his plasma rifle's charge and ensuring his stealth suit's systems were fully operational. The suit's dark material absorbed light, making him nearly invisible in the facility's shadows. A gift from his contacts in the Resistance, it had saved his life more times than he could count. Security patrol approaching the east entrance, the AI warned. Window of opportunity in 3 minutes. Mason moved to the airlock, his movements precise and controlled. The Resistance had been tracking disappearances across 3 star systems, prominent scientists, engineers, and civilians with unique abilities. Now he knew where at least some of them had ended up. The airlock cycled, and Mason stepped onto Europa's frozen surface. The facility loomed before him, its dark metal walls reflecting Jupiter's distant light. He activated his magnetic boots, moving quickly across the ice toward a maintenance hatch his scans had revealed. Inside, the facility's sterile corridors echoed with an oppressive silence. Mason's enhanced hearing picked up the distant hum of machinery and, more disturbingly, muffled sounds of distress. He moved deeper into the complex, avoiding security cameras and patrols with practiced ease. The lower levels were heavily guarded, but Mason had planned for this. He released a small swarm of microdrones, their electromagnetic pulses disabling the security systems in a cascading failure that would look like a power fluctuation. In the confusion that followed, he made his way to the detention area. Each cell he passed revealed horrors, beings from across the galaxy subjected to cruel experiments. But it was the last cell that stopped him in his tracks. Inside, suspended in a containment field, floated a female figure. Her skin had a subtle iridescent quality, shifting between deep blue and violet. Delicate patterns of light moved beneath her surface like stellar nebulae. She was a Celestian, one of the mysterious beings from the galaxy's core regions. Mason had never seen one in person before. The Celestians were known for their powerful telepathic abilities and their policy of non-interference with other species. Finding one here, in a secret human facility, could spark an interstellar incident. The Celestian's eyes opened, revealing swirling pools of silver that fixed directly on Mason, despite his stealth suit. He felt a gentle probe against his mind, like a whisper seeking permission to speak. "You are different from the others," her voice echoed in his thoughts. "You came to help." "Yes," Mason replied softly, already working on the cell's controls. "I'm Mason Hayes. I'm getting you out of here." "I am Naya," she responded. "But you must hurry. They are coming." As if on cue, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Mason worked faster, his fingers flying over the control panel. The containment field flickered and died, and Naya dropped gracefully to the floor. "There are others," she projected urgently. "Beings taken from their homes, their families. We cannot leave them." Mason nodded, already formulating a new plan. "Can you walk?" Naya took an unsteady step, then straightened with determination. "I can do more than walk," she answered, her silver eyes beginning to glow. "They tried to suppress my abilities, to study them. They failed. The sound of boots on metal echoed from the corridor. Mason raised his rifle, positioning himself between Naya and the entrance. Then I suggest we show them exactly what they failed to contain. As security forces rounded the corner, Naya raised her hands. The air itself seemed to ripple, and the guards were thrown backward by an invisible force. Mason stared in amazement as objects began floating around them, responding to her will. "Shall we proceed with the rescue?" Naya's mental voice carried a hint of satisfaction. Mason grinned despite the danger. This mission had just become far more interesting than he'd anticipated. Together, they moved into the corridor, ready to face whatever came next. The real question wasn't whether they could free the other prisoners. It was what they would discover about the dark forces behind these experiments, and how it would change the relationship between humans and aliens forever. The detention level erupted into chaos as Mason and Naya moved through the corridors. Alarms blared overhead, while emergency lights bathed everything in pulsing red. Security forces converged from multiple directions, but they weren't prepared for the combination of Mason's tactical expertise and Naya's telekinetic abilities. Left corridor, Mason called out, his rifle dropping 2 guards with precise stun blasts. "The other prisoners are being held in Block C." Naya nodded, her silver eyes glowing brighter as she created a protective barrier around them. Objects flew through the air like projectiles. Pieces of wall panels, dropped weapons, even the unconscious guards themselves became ammunition under her control. "The others are afraid," her thoughts reached Mason. "Many have been here for months, subjected to tests and experiments. Some have lost hope." They reached a heavy security door marked Block C. Mason planted explosive charges while Naya kept their perimeter secure. The door blew inward with a thunderous boom, revealing a long row of cells similar to the one where Naya had been held. Inside each cell was a different species, a crystalline Novarian whose faceted body refracted light into rainbow patterns, a pair of gaseous Etherians swirling in their containment field, even a massive Chronaxian warrior whose metallic scales gleamed under the emergency lights. "This is a rescue," Mason announced, his voice firm and reassuring. "We're getting everyone out of here. Naya, can you communicate with them?" "Yes," she responded, sending waves of calming energy to the frightened prisoners. "They understand." But Mason, there's something else, something deeper in the facility. The researchers were working toward something specific. Mason began releasing prisoners while Naya maintained their defense. Each freed being joined their effort, adding their unique abilities to the escape attempt. The Novarian used his crystalline body to redirect energy weapons, while the Etherians could pass through walls to scout ahead. "What do you mean, something specific?" Mason asked as they moved deeper into the facility. The question was answered when they reached a heavily fortified laboratory section. Through reinforced windows, they saw banks of complex equipment surrounding a central chamber. Inside, swirling patterns of energy pulsed and shifted, reminiscent of the patterns beneath Naya's skin, but twisted into something unnatural. "They were studying our abilities." Naya's mental voice was tight with horror, trying to find a way to extract and replicate them, to create weapons. The Chronaxian warrior, who had introduced himself as Vex, growled deeply. "Many of my people disappeared over the past year. Now we know why." Mason accessed a nearby terminal, his fingers flying over the controls. "This goes beyond a single rogue facility. There's a whole network, Project Ascendant. They're trying to engineer human soldiers with alien abilities." Security forces had regrouped, and the sound of heavy machinery echoed through the corridors. "They're bringing in combat mechs," Mason warned. "We need to move." "Wait," Naya pressed. "This data, we cannot let them keep it. What they've learned here, what they've done to us, it cannot be repeated." Mason nodded grimly, pulling a specialized device from his tactical vest. "Already on it. This virus will corrupt their databases and transmit everything to my resistance contacts. The galaxy needs to know what happened here." The first combat mech rounded the corner, its heavy armor bristling with weapons. Vex charged forward, his metallic scales deflecting laser fire while the Etherians flowed into the mech's joints, disrupting its systems from within. Nea's powers had grown stronger since her release, as if making up for lost time. She lifted 2 more mechs off the ground, crushing them together with a tremendous display of telekinetic force. The sight of her power made Mason realize just how much the facility's containment systems had been suppressing her abilities. "Download complete," Mason announced. "Time to go. Everyone stay close." They fought their way back through the facility, their diverse abilities complementing each other in ways their captors had never anticipated. The Novarian created crystalline barriers, while Nea's telekinesis cleared paths through debris and opponents. Mason's tactical guidance kept them moving efficiently toward their escape route. But as they neared the surface exit, Nea suddenly staggered. "Mason, the scientists. They're attempting something desperate." The facility's lights flickered, and a deep thrumming vibration ran through the floors and walls. Emergency warnings blared from every speaker. "Warning. Containment breach in progress. Project Descendant primary chamber unstable. Catastrophic failure imminent." They're overloading the energy collection systems, Mason realized. They'll destroy everything to keep their secrets. "Including Europa's ice crust," Nea added. The explosion would breach the surface, possibly exposing the moon's subsurface ocean. Millions would die in the colonies. Mason's ship AI confirmed the danger, detecting massive energy buildup. Estimate 15 minutes to critical failure. The group looked to Mason and Naya, who had naturally fallen into leadership roles. The human and the Celestian exchanged a glance, both knowing what had to be done. "Get to the ship," Mason ordered the others. "Vex, you know basic flight controls." The Chronaxian nodded. "Enough to get us clear." "Then go. Naya and I will handle the reactor." Mason turned to his newfound ally. "I have an idea, but it's going to take both of us. Think you're up for one more impossible task." Nea's silver eyes met his, and he felt her confidence flow through their mental link. "Together, then. Show me your plan." As the others hurried toward the surface, Mason and Naya raced deeper into the facility, toward the heart of Project Descendant. The secrets they would uncover there would change everything. Not just about the project, but about the very nature of human and alien potential. The real question was whether they would survive to share what they learned. Mason and Nea descended into the facility's reactor core, where Project Descendant's primary containment chamber pulsed with unstable energy. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows through clouds of venting steam, while warning klaxons echoed off metal walls. "The energy patterns," Mason observed, checking readings on his tactical display. "They're similar to your natural abilities, but corrupted somehow." "Yes," Nea confirmed, her mental voice tight with concentration. "They attempted to isolate and artificially replicate the quantum psychic field that gives my people our abilities. But they understood so little of what they were dealing with." The chamber before them was a nightmare of twisted science. Crystalline matrices hummed with captured energy, while diagnostic screens displayed cascading failure warnings. At the center, a swirling vortex of power threatened to tear itself apart. 12 minutes to critical failure," Mason's ship AI announced through his comlink. Mason moved to a control station, his fingers dancing across holographic interfaces. "If we can't shut it down conventionally, we'll have to try something unconventional. Naya, remember what you said about them not understanding the true nature of your abilities." "You have an idea," she responded, reading the direction of his thoughts. "They tried to mechanically replicate something that's fundamentally organic and consciousness-based," Mason explained, bringing up facility schematics. "But what if instead of fighting the energy buildup, we guide it? Channel it through someone who actually understands how to handle it?" Nea's silver eyes widened as she grasped his plan. "You want me to absorb the excess energy?" "Mason, the amount of power involved, it could destroy me." "Not alone," Mason said firmly. "Look at these readings. The energy isn't just random. It's responding to consciousness, to will. That's why their experiments failed. They treated it like a weapon to be controlled rather than a force to be understood. He stepped closer to her, his expression intense. We form a link. You channel the energy. I help ground and direct it. Together. It has never been done, Nea warned. The joining of human and celestial consciousness at such a deep level. There would be no secrets between us. Everything we are, everything we've experienced. Then we'll be the first. Mason replied without hesitation. I trust you, Nea. Do you trust me? The facility shuddered around them as another power surge hit. They had no more time for debate. Nea reached out, her iridescent hands clasping Mason's. The moment their minds fully connected, Mason gasped. It was like suddenly seeing in colors he didn't know existed. Nea's consciousness was vast, a symphony of thought and emotion that made human experience seem monochromatic in comparison. But instead of being overwhelmed, he found himself adapting, his own mind expanding to match her frequency. Through their link, he shared his own experiences, the horrors of the Proxima War, the loss of his squad, his dedication to preventing such suffering from happening again. Nea absorbed it all, their separate experiences merging into a shared understanding that transcended species. Now Nea commanded, and together they reached out toward the maelstrom of corrupted energy. The power fought them at first, wild and chaotic. But where the facility's scientists had tried to cage and control it, Mason and Nea offered understanding and harmony. Through their combined consciousness, they could see what the energy truly was, not just power, but potential. The very force that allowed consciousness to affect reality. 7 minutes to critical failure, the AI warned. Mason felt Nea's strength beginning to falter under the strain. Without hesitation, he pushed more of himself into their link, offering his own life force to support her. Their separate identities began to blur, human and celestial consciousness interweaving until it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. Through their merged awareness, they made a stunning discovery. The facility's scientists had unknowingly tapped into something fundamental, the underlying field that connected all conscious beings. The same force that gave Celestians their abilities existed in humans too, just expressed differently. They were right about one thing: Nea's thoughts merged with Mason's. Humans do have the potential, but it cannot be taken or forced. It must be understood, earned, shared. Together, they began to redirect the chaotic energy, not trying to contain it, but rather to harmonize with it. The warning klaxons gradually fell silent as power levels stabilized. The very force that was meant to be a weapon became something else entirely, a bridge between species, a proof that humanity's true potential lay not in domination but in cooperation. As the immediate danger passed, Mason and Nea carefully separated their consciousness, though something of their connection remained. They had seen the truth of each other, and there was no going back from that knowledge. Power levels normalizing, the AI reported. Containment stable. Mason leaned against a console, physically and mentally exhausted. That was intense. Indeed, Nea agreed, her mental voice warm with affection and respect. You surprised me, Mason Hayes. Few humans would have been capable of such a joining. What we saw, Mason said slowly, what we learned about the connection between our species, this changes everything. Yes, Nea's silver eyes glowed with purpose, but there are those who will resist such change. The ones behind Project Ascendant will not stop because of one failure. Mason straightened, his strength returning. Then we'll have to stop them. But first, we need to get this data to people who can help. I know some trustworthy contacts in both human and alien governments. And I know others who would support our cause, Nea added, including some among my own people who have long argued for closer cooperation with humans. Looking at the now stable containment chamber, Mason felt a mix of concern and hope. They had prevented a disaster and discovered something remarkable in the process. But he knew this was just the beginning. The real challenge would be convincing others to accept what they had learned about the true potential of human-alien cooperation. Ready to change the galaxy? He asked with a slight smile. Nea's response carried both determination and warmth. Together, my friend. As it should be. 3 weeks after the Europa incident, Mason's stealth ship drifted in high orbit above Mars, its advanced cloaking systems rendering it invisible to conventional sensors. Inside, the command center had been transformed into an impromptu war room, where representatives from 6 different species gathered around a holographic display of Project Descendants' known facilities. Our intelligence confirms 3 more research sites, reported Vex, the Chronaxian warrior who had escaped with them. His metallic scales reflected the red glow of the Mars surface below. 2 in the outer colonies, 1 on Earth itself. Mason studied the tactical overlay, his expression grim. They're adapting to our Europa raid. Security has been doubled at all locations, and they're moving their most sensitive research deeper underground. They're also accelerating their experiments, Nea added, her mental voice carrying undertones of concern. The Celestian stood beside Mason, her iridescent skin shifting with subtle patterns of light. More disappearances have been reported across multiple sectors. The Novarian scientist they had rescued, who called himself Crystal, manipulated the hologram with crystalline appendages. I've analyzed the data we recovered. They're not just trying to replicate our abilities anymore. They're attempting to combine them, to create hybrid powers that no natural species possesses. The implications were chilling. Since their escape, Mason and Naya had been gathering evidence and allies, building a coalition of humans and aliens who opposed Project Descendants' methods. But for every supporter they found, they also discovered how deep the conspiracy reached. We have another problem, announced Dr. Sarah Chen, one of Mason's resistance contacts who had joined their cause. Someone's trying to discredit our evidence. The official channels are calling the Europa incident a terrorist attack, claiming we destroyed valuable research into peaceful human-alien cooperation. Mason felt Nea's frustration through their lingering mental connection. Since their consciousness-merging experience in the reactor core, they maintained a subtle link, allowing them to share thoughts and emotions. It had proved invaluable in coordinating their efforts, but it also meant they shared each other's burden of worry and responsibility. They're trying to control the narrative, Mason observed. Make us look like the villains before we can expose their real activities. We need irrefutable proof, Nea suggested, something they cannot dismiss or explain away. The Etherian twins, who had taken the names Whisper and Echo, swirled in agitation. Their gaseous forms created complex patterns that their universal translator converted to speech. The Earth facility, Whisper suggested. It's their primary research center. If we could access their central database. It's also their most heavily defended location, Vex growled. Underground bunker beneath the Atacama Desert, multiple security layers, automated defense systems, and a small army of private military contractors. Mason began pacing, his tactical mind working through possibilities. Which makes it perfect. They're so confident in their security that they're keeping their most damning evidence there, including, I suspect, records of who's really funding and supporting this project. The hologram shifted to show the Earth facility's defenses. Crystal's analysis highlighted weak points and potential entry routes, but the challenges were daunting. Even with our combined abilities, he noted, a frontal assault would be suicide. Then we don't assault, Mason declared, a plan forming in his mind. We infiltrate, but we'll need a distraction, something big enough to draw their attention, but not so big it brings in outside forces. I have an idea, Nea projected, sharing images through their link, but it will require perfect timing and coordination. And it will be dangerous. Mason absorbed her plan through their connection, his eyes widening at its audacity. It could work, but you'd be putting yourself at extreme risk. We all risk everything, she reminded him. Besides, I won't be alone. The others watched this silent exchange with varying degrees of fascination and uncertainty. The bond between the human and the Celestian was unlike anything they had encountered before, a living proof of what their two species could achieve together. "Share it with us," Dr. Chen requested. "Whatever you're planning, we're all in this together now." Over the next hour, they refined Nea's plan. It was elegant in its complexity, using their enemies' own prejudices and assumptions against them. While Nea would allow herself to be detected approaching the facility, appearing to attempt a solo rescue of supposedly captured Celestians, the others would use the distraction to infiltrate from multiple points. "They'll be so focused on capturing a Celestian," Mason explained, "they won't notice us moving through their blind spots, especially with the Etherians disrupting their internal sensors and Crystal refracting their security scanners." Vex smiled, showing metallic teeth. "And once inside, we split into teams," Mason continued. "Dr. Chen and Crystal head for the central database. Vex and the Etherians secure our escape route. Naya and I." He paused, sharing a significant look with his partner. "We find out exactly what they're working on in their deep labs." "There's something else," Naya added. "Something we haven't shared yet." Through their link, Mason felt her certainty that the time had come to reveal what they had discovered in the Europa facility. "During our escape from Europa," Mason began carefully, "Naya and I discovered something unprecedented. The energy field that gives Celestians their abilities. It exists in humans too. Project Ascendant's scientists stumbled onto this truth, but they're approaching it all wrong. They think they can force it, control it. But it's about connection, understanding, growth." The revelation caused a stir among their allies. The implications were staggering, not just for human potential, but for the future of human-alien relations. "That's why this mission is so crucial," Mason concluded. "What we find in that facility could either start a war between species or open the door to a level of cooperation the galaxy has never seen." As their allies discussed the plan's details, Mason felt Nea's consciousness brush against his. "Are you certain about this?" she asked privately. "Once we reveal everything we know, there will be no going back." Mason's response carried absolute conviction. "Some truths are worth any risk. Humanity needs to understand that our future lies in cooperation, not conquest." The others might not have shared their mental link, but looking around the room, Mason saw the same determination reflected in every face, human and alien alike. They had all suffered under Project Ascendant's experiments, and each had chosen to fight back, not just for themselves, but for the principle that different species could work together for a greater good. As Mars turned slowly beneath them, the unlikely coalition finalized their plans. In less than 24 hours, they would launch an operation that could change the course of human-alien relations forever. The only question was whether they would survive to see those changes take effect. The Atacama Desert facility erupted into chaos exactly as planned. Nea's approach triggered every alarm in the complex, drawing security forces to the surface, while Mason and the others slipped through underground maintenance tunnels. Through their mental link, Mason felt her precise control as she put on a convincing show of attempted infiltration. "They're responding exactly as expected," Nea projected, her thoughts tinged with satisfaction as she led the facility's forces on a magnificent chase across the desert. "Their arrogance makes them predictable." Mason led his team through the darkness, guided by Crystal's ability to refract what little light existed and the Etherian twins' sensor-jamming presence. Dr. Chen followed, carrying specialized equipment for data extraction, while Vex brought up the rear, his metallic scales providing natural armor. "First checkpoint," Mason whispered as they reached a security station. The guards never saw the Etherians coming. Whisper and echo flowed through ventilation systems, inducing unconsciousness without harm. "Crystal, you and Dr. Chen head for the data center. Vex, secure our exit route. I'm heading to the lower labs." They split up, each group moving with practiced precision. Through his link with Naya, Mason coordinated their movements with her surface distraction. The facility's security forces were so focused on the apparent Celestian threat that they never noticed their internal systems being systematically compromised. Mason descended to the lowest level, where Project Descendant's most sensitive research took place. The corridors here were different, darker, lined with strange energy conduits that pulsed with familiar patterns. He recognized them from Europa, attempts to artificially replicate Celestian abilities. Mason, Nea's thought voice suddenly tensed. Something's wrong. They're not just defending, they're hurting me. Before Mason could respond, emergency barriers slammed down throughout the facility. A calm voice echoed through hidden speakers. Containment protocols activated. Thank you for your cooperation. It's a trap, Mason realized aloud. They knew we were coming. Of course we did, a new voice responded. From a side corridor stepped a figure Mason recognized from intelligence briefings. Director Elizabeth Kane, Project Descendant's chief researcher. We've been watching you since Europa, waiting to see who you'd contact, what allies you'd gather. Security forces emerged from concealed positions, weapons trained on Mason. Through his link with Naya, he felt her being surrounded on the surface. Kane smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Did you really think we'd let a Celestian escape without a way to track her? Everything you've done has played into our hands. Now we have subjects from multiple species to study, including proof of successful human-alien mental bonding. Mason, Naya projected urgently. Remember what we learned on Europa, what we really discovered about the connection between our species. Mason stood straighter, a slight smile playing at his lips. You know, Director for Brilliant Scientists, you've missed something fundamental about your research. Oh, Kane raised an eyebrow. And what would that be? You're so focused on trying to steal and replicate abilities that you never stop to understand their true nature. Mason closed his eyes, feeling the energy patterns around him, seeing them as he had learned to through Nea's perception. These powers you're studying, they're not weapons to be taken. They're expressions of connection. The energy conduits along the walls began to pulse more rapidly. Kane's smile faltered as her instrument started registering unusual readings. What are you doing? Nothing, Mason replied calmly. Just finally accepting what's already there. The potential you tried to force, it only works when freely given, freely shared. Through his link with Naya, their consciousness began to merge as it had in the Europa facility. But this time, they weren't fighting to contain energy. They were learning to channel what naturally existed between all conscious beings. The effect rippled outward. The Etherians felt it first, their gaseous forms glowing with new awareness. Crystal's crystalline body began resonating at frequencies that disrupted the facility's power systems. Even Vex felt it, his metallic scales vibrating in harmony with the emerging energy field. Impossible, Kane whispered, watching as her weapons and security systems stopped responding. The human brain isn't capable of. That's where you're wrong. Dr. Chen's voice came over the facility's comm system. We've finished decoding your research data. You were so close to understanding, but your methods blinded you to the truth. Humanity's potential was never about stealing or replicating alien abilities. It was about learning to connect, to grow, to share. The security forces lowered their weapons, many of them staggering as they felt the wave of consciousness expansion wash over them. Through his connection with Naya, Mason guided the process, helping others understand what they were experiencing. Now they see, Naya projected, her mental voice filled with hope. Not just the power, but the responsibility that comes with it. Kane watched in disbelief as her life's work transformed into something entirely different before her eyes. What have you done? Created a bridge, Mason answered simply. What you tried to achieve through force, we're offering freely. A way for humans and aliens to truly understand each other, to share knowledge and abilities through mutual growth and trust. The facility's systems came back online, but now they displayed something unexpected, proof of what Mason and Naya had discovered. The data showed that human consciousness could indeed achieve abilities similar to other species, but only through understanding and cooperation. never through force or theft. As security forces stood down and project scientists watched in amazement, Mason felt Nea's presence drawing closer. She had fought her way down to join him, though fought was perhaps the wrong word now. Those who had tried to stop her were now experiencing their first taste of genuine connection with a Celestian consciousness. They will need guidance, Nea observed as she entered the room, her iridescent form glowing with power. This is only the beginning. Mason nodded, looking at Kane and the others. Your project sought to elevate humanity by stealing from other species, but real elevation comes from growing together, from sharing knowledge and understanding. That's the true potential we discovered. In the days that followed, the revelation of Project Ascendant's activities, and more importantly, what Mason and Naya had discovered about human potential, sent shockwaves through both human and alien societies. The facility became a center for legitimate research into consciousness expansion and interspecies cooperation. The coalition they had formed became the foundation for a new organization, dedicated to fostering understanding and ethical development of shared abilities between species. Those who had once been test subjects became teachers, helping others understand the proper way to develop their latent potential. Standing on the facility's roof one evening, watching the sun set over the Atacama Desert, Mason felt Nea's consciousness brush against his. "Do you regret any of it?" she asked, though she already knew the answer through their connection. "Not for a moment," Mason replied, both aloud and in thought. "Though I doubt this was quite the reward you had in mind when I rescued you." Nea's silver eyes sparkled with amusement. "Perhaps not. But it is something far better. A chance to build something new. Together." Around them, the desert air hummed with potential as human and alien minds learned to reach out to each other, to understand and share in ways previously thought impossible. It wasn't just about power or abilities anymore. It was about connection, growth, and the kind of strength that could only come from true cooperation. The future they had helped create wouldn't be easy. There would be those who resisted change, who feared what this new understanding might mean. But looking at the mixed group of humans and aliens working together below, Mason knew they had started something that couldn't be stopped. Humanity had finally found its true path to the stars, not through conquest or theft, but through partnership and shared growth with the very beings they had once sought to exploit. And that perhaps was the greatest reward of all.